I watched in horror as my body tumbled down the marble staircase, each step sending waves of agony through my bones. Blood pooled beneath my head as 50 of the city's elite watched in stunned silence. But what happened in the next 60 seconds would expose a truth so shocking that it would destroy a billionaire marriage and change my life forever. This is my story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now let me take you back to where it all began, just 3 days before that life-changing moment. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I've never been the kind of person who believed in fairy tales or second chances. I'm 32 years old, a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table for my 8-year-old daughter Carmen. By day, I clean offices in the financial district downtown. By night, I work as a hospital cleaner, scrubbing floors while the city sleeps. It's honest work, but it's the kind of invisible labor that keeps the world running while nobody notices you exist. My life had been a series of closed doors and missed opportunities. After Carmen's father abandoned us when she was just 2, I'd learned to expect disappointment. I'd learned that people like me don't get lucky breaks, don't stumble into better circumstances, and certainly don't cross paths with billionaires in ways that matter. We exist in completely different universes, separated by money, connections, and circumstances that feel impossible to bridge. But sometimes life has other plans. That Wednesday morning started like every other day for the past 6 years. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning in our tiny 1-bedroom apartment, made Carmen's lunch for school, and caught the first bus downtown to start my cleaning shift at Pinnacle Financial Tower. The building housed some of the most powerful investment firms in the country, and I'd been cleaning their offices for 3 years without anyone ever really seeing me. I was invisible in the way that service workers often are to wealthy people. They'd walk past me in the hallways, step around my cleaning cart, have important phone conversations about millions of dollars while I emptied their trash cans. To them, I was part of the furniture, part of the background noise of their successful lives. That morning, I was cleaning the executive floor when I overheard a conversation that would change everything. I was emptying wastebaskets in the conference room when 2 women in expensive suits walked in, discussing what sounded like a major charity event. "We're still short 3 servers for the Sterling Foundation auction Saturday night," the first woman was saying. "The catering company just called and said 3 of their people got sick. We need replacements immediately." "What about the cleaning staff?" the second woman suggested. "Some of them might be interested in earning extra money for one night." My heart jumped. The Sterling Foundation was legendary in our city. Their annual charity auction raised millions for children's hospitals, and it was attended by everyone who mattered in business, politics, and entertainment. The idea of working such an exclusive event was both terrifying and exciting. I'd never done catering work before, but I needed the money desperately. Carmen needed new school clothes, our rent was going up next month, and my old car was making sounds that suggested expensive repairs were coming. When one of the women noticed me and asked if I'd be interested in serving at the event, I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. "The pay is $300 for the evening," she explained. "Black and white uniform, minimal interaction with guests, just serve champagne and hors d'oeuvre. Think you can handle that?" $300 was more than I made in a week at either of my regular jobs. I nodded eagerly, trying not to show how much that amount meant to me. She handed me a business card with details about where to report Saturday evening and what to wear. For the next 3 days, I couldn't stop thinking about the event. Carmen was excited when I told her I was working at a fancy party with rich people. She made me promise to tell her everything about the beautiful dresses and jewelry I would see. In her 8-year-old mind, it was like I was going to a real-life princess ball. I borrowed a white blouse from my neighbor Rosa and bought a black skirt from the thrift store. I practiced walking in the only pair of dress shoes I owned, old heels that pinched my feet but looked presentable enough. I watched YouTube videos about proper serving etiquette, determined not to embarrass myself in front of people who belonged to a world I'd only seen in movies. Saturday evening arrived faster than I expected. The Sterling Foundation auction was being held at the Grandview Estate, a mansion that had been converted into an exclusive event venue. As my bus approached the location, I pressed my face to the window in amazement. The estate sat on perfectly manicured grounds that seemed to stretch forever, with fountains, gardens, and a circular driveway filled with luxury cars that cost more than most people's houses. I entered through the service entrance, where a stern-faced catering manager named Patricia briefed the serving staff. There were 8 of us total, and I was clearly the most nervous. The others looked like they'd done this type of work before, comfortable with the expectations and protocol. "Remember," Patricia said, her voice sharp with authority, "you are invisible tonight. Serve drinks, collect empty glasses, smile politely if spoken to, but do not engage in conversations with the guests. These people are here to support charity and network with each other. They are not here to chat with the help. Stay professional, stay quiet, and stay out of the way." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The main ballroom took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with elaborate frescoes. The walls were lined with artwork that probably cost more than I would earn in my entire lifetime. Round tables covered in silk linens were set with china and silverware that gleamed under the soft lighting. Everything was perfect, elegant, and intimidating. As guests began to arrive, I positioned myself near the entrance with a tray of champagne glasses, trying to blend into the background as instructed. The people flowing into the ballroom looked like they'd stepped out of magazines. The women wore designer gowns and jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight. The men looked distinguished in perfectly tailored tuxedos, moving with the confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. I recognized some faces from newspaper society pages and business magazines. There was Judge Harrison, who'd been in the news for his tough stance on white-collar crime. City Councilwoman Victoria Nash was there, along with her husband, who owned half the real estate in the downtown district. I saw the CEO of Premier Banking and his wife, who was famous for her charitable work with animal shelters. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. I served champagne, collected empty glasses, and managed to remain invisible as requested. The auction items were incredible. Vacation packages to private islands, original paintings by famous artists, lunch with celebrities, and experiences that most people could never imagine affording. The bidding was casual and generous, with people raising their paddles to pledge amounts that represented months or years of my salary. Then I saw her. Victoria Ashworth swept into the ballroom like she owned not just the room but everyone in it. She was stunning in the way that unlimited money could make someone stunning. Her dress was clearly custom-made, flowing around her like liquid gold. Her jewelry caught the light with every movement, and her blonde hair was styled in a way that probably took hours to achieve. She moved through the crowd with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been denied anything she wanted. But it wasn't her beauty or wealth that made her stand out. It was the way she looked at people. Her eyes would sweep over someone, categorize them instantly, and either dismiss them or grant them her attention based on their perceived value. When she looked at the serving staff, her expression didn't change at all. We literally didn't register as human beings worth acknowledging. I watched her work the room, air-kissing important people, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, and positioning herself to be seen by everyone who mattered. She was performing the role of charitable socialite, but there was something calculating about every gesture, every smile. "That's Victoria Ashworth," whispered another server as we passed each other near the kitchen entrance. "Her husband owns Ashworth Industries. They say he's worth over $2 billion. She married him 5 years ago when she was barely 25. Now she acts like she built the empire herself." I nodded, storing away the information. In my world, billionaires were abstract concepts, not real people you might serve champagne to at charity events. The idea that someone my age could be married to that kind of wealth felt surreal. The evening progressed with live music, dinner service, and the main auction presentation. I stayed busy, refilling drinks and clearing tables, proud that I was managing to do the job without any major mistakes. A few guests had even smiled at me when I served them, small gestures that made me feel less invisible. That's when the incident happened that would change everything. The auction was in full swing, with the auctioneer presenting a painting that was expected to sell for over $50,000. I was walking along the back wall, carrying a tray of fresh champagne glasses, when I noticed an elderly woman sitting alone at a corner table. She looked tired, possibly overwhelmed by the noise and activity around her. Her champagne glass was empty, and she seemed to be looking around for a server. I changed course to help her, but I didn't notice that Victoria Ashworth was walking directly behind me, engaged in an animated conversation on her cell phone about some business deal that wasn't going her way. "No, that's completely unacceptable," she was saying loudly into her phone, her voice sharp with irritation. "I don't care what the lawyers say. Find a way to make it work, or find new lawyers." I was focused on reaching the elderly woman when Victoria suddenly stopped walking to emphasize something to whoever she was talking to. I couldn't stop in time and bumped gently into her shoulder, causing her to stumble slightly. None of my champagne spilled. Her dress wasn't damaged. Her phone didn't fall, but the look she gave me could have frozen fire. "Watch where you're going," she hissed, loud enough that several nearby guests turned to look. "I'm so sorry," I said immediately, stepping back. "I didn't see you stop. Are you okay?" She looked me up and down with unconcealed disgust, taking in my thrift store skirt, borrowed blouse, and nervous expression. "Obviously I'm fine," she said coldly, "but you need to be more careful. This dress costs more than you probably make in a year." Her words stung, but I kept my voice polite. "Again, I apologize. It won't happen again." "It better not," she replied, her voice carrying across the nearby tables. "Some people clearly don't belong in civilized company." Several guests were staring now, some looking uncomfortable with her public humiliation of a server, others seeming entertained by the drama. I felt my cheeks burning with shame, but I forced myself to smile and nod. "Of course. Excuse me," I said, trying to move away. But Victoria wasn't finished. The phone call had clearly put her in a bad mood, and I had become a convenient target for her frustration. "Actually, wait," she said, her voice getting louder. "I want to talk to your supervisor. This kind of carelessness is exactly why events like this get ruined. You people need to understand that there are standards here." Patricia, the catering manager, appeared almost instantly, drawn by the commotion. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Ashworth?" "Yes, there's a problem," Victoria said, gesturing at me like I was evidence in a criminal case. "This server just crashed into me while I was on an important business call. She could have ruined my dress or caused me to fall. I want her removed from the event immediately." My heart sank. I needed this job, needed the $300 desperately. Carmen was counting on new school clothes, and our landlord had already warned me about the rent increase. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Ashworth," Patricia said, her professional tone barely concealing her frustration with the situation. "I'll address this immediately." She turned to me with an expression that said my night was over. "Elena, I think it's best if you take a break. Clock out and we'll discuss this later." "Please," I said quietly, trying not to let my desperation show. "It was an accident. I was just trying to serve the elderly lady at table 12. I'll be more careful." Victoria laughed, a sound without warmth or humor. "More careful? You shouldn't be here at all. This is a charity event for the city's most important people, not a job training program for people who don't know how to walk properly." The crowd around us was growing larger. Some guests looked uncomfortable with the public scene Victoria was creating, but nobody was willing to intervene. In their world, servers were expendable, and Victoria Ashworth was someone whose displeasure could have consequences for their own social standing. "Mrs. Ashworth," Patricia tried again, "perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No," Victoria interrupted, her voice rising. "I want everyone to see what happens when standards aren't maintained. This woman clearly doesn't understand her place or how to behave around her betters." Her betters. The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought about Carmen at home, probably doing homework at our kitchen table, excited to hear about my adventure at the fancy party. I thought about my two regular jobs, the early mornings and late nights, the constant struggle to make ends meet while trying to give my daughter a better life than I'd had. I thought about dignity, about the right to be treated like a human being regardless of how much money you have in your bank account. "I understand I made a mistake," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling I felt inside. "But I'm a hard worker, and I was just trying to do my job well. I don't think that makes me less deserving of basic respect. The ballroom went quiet. Even the auction had paused, with the auctioneer and guests turning to see what was causing the disturbance. Victoria's face turned red with fury. "Respect?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You think you deserve respect? You're a nobody. A servant. You're here to serve drinks and stay invisible, not to lecture your betters about respect." "Everyone deserves respect," I said quietly, but loud enough for the surrounding crowd to hear, regardless of their job or bank account. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria looked around at the watching faces, many of which now seemed uncomfortable with the scene she was creating. But instead of backing down, she seemed to take their attention as encouragement. "You want respect?" she said, her voice dangerous now. "Let me teach you about respect." That's when she placed both hands on my shoulders and pushed. I felt myself falling backward, my feet tangling in the long tablecloth behind me. The marble staircase that led up to the venue's mezzanine level was directly behind where I'd been standing. I tumbled down 15 steps, my body hitting each marble edge with sickening thuds. The crystal champagne glasses on my tray shattered around me, sending shards across the floor. My head struck the bottom step with a crack that echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom. Blood began pooling beneath my skull as pain shot through every part of my body. 50 of the city's most powerful people stared down at me in shocked silence. Some pulled out their phones, though whether to call for help or record the incident, I couldn't tell. Victoria stood at the top of the staircase, breathing hard, her hands still raised from the push. For a moment, she looked as shocked as everyone else by what she'd just done. But then someone spoke from the crowd, and everything changed. "Stop." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. A man stepped forward from the crowd, and for the first time since I'd been pushed down the stairs, someone looked truly angry. The man who stepped forward wasn't what I expected. While everyone else in the ballroom wore designer tuxedos and expensive jewelry, he was dressed simply in a well-tailored but understated black suit. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and the kind of calm presence that commanded attention without demanding it. But what struck me most as I lay bleeding on the marble floor was the look in his eyes. It wasn't the detached curiosity of the other guests, or the horrified fascination of people watching a scandal unfold. It was genuine concern, mixed with something that looked like recognition. "That's enough," he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom as he walked toward Victoria. Every step was measured, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of barely contained fury that made even the wealthy guests step back. Victoria's confident smirk faltered as she realized who was speaking. "James," she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. "She embarrassed us. She needed to learn her place." James. Even through the pain radiating through my skull, the name triggered something in my memory. James Ashworth. Victoria's billionaire husband, the man whose industrial empire had made him one of the most powerful people in the country. "The only person who's been embarrassed here," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "is you." Victoria's face went pale. "What are you talking about? James, you're overreacting. She's just a server who got too mouthy for her own good." But James wasn't looking at her anymore. He was walking down the marble steps toward me, his movements careful and deliberate. When he reached where I lay bleeding, he knelt beside me with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so powerful. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice completely different from the cold tone he'd used with Victoria. "Don't try to move. We need to get you medical attention." "I think I'm okay," I managed, though my head was pounding and I could taste blood. "Just dizzy." He pulled out his phone and called for an ambulance, his voice sharp with authority as he demanded immediate response. Then he turned back to me, and I saw something in his expression that made no sense. He was studying my face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Elena Rodriguez," I whispered. The change in his expression was immediate and dramatic. His eyes widened with what looked like shock, then recognition. then something that might have been wonder. "Elena Rodriguez from Santos Street?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart stopped. Santos Street was where I'd grown up, in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. It was where I'd lived until I was 18, when I'd moved out to start my own life. But how could this billionaire possibly know about Santos Street, let alone know that I'd lived there? "Yes," I said, confusion mixing with the pain. "How do you know that?" James closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were filled with an emotion I couldn't identify. "Because 12 years ago," he said, his voice carrying across the now completely silent ballroom, "you saved my life." The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. Victoria was staring at her husband in horror, clearly having no idea what he was talking about. 12 years ago," James continued, his voice getting stronger as he addressed not just me but the entire ballroom. "I was 19 years old and living on the streets, not because I was addicted to drugs or because I'd made terrible choices, but because my parents had died in a car accident, and I'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go." The crowd was murmuring now, shocked by this revelation. The official story of James Ashworth's rise to power had always focused on his brilliant business acumen and strategic investments. Nobody talked about him being homeless. "I'd been living in my car for 3 months," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "I was parked outside a small apartment building on Santos Street, trying to decide whether life was worth continuing. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I had $7 to my name and no prospects for changing my situation. The memory hit me like lightning. 12 years ago, a beat-up Honda Civic parked outside our apartment building for days. A young man who looked lost and broken, sitting in the driver's seat during the coldest week of winter. It was snowing," I whispered, remembering. "It was snowing," he confirmed, a small smile crossing his face despite the gravity of the situation. "And you came out of the building with a bag of groceries. You saw me sitting there, and you knocked on my window." I remembered now. I'd been 17, working part-time at a grocery store while finishing high school. I'd saved up money to buy food for the week, but when I saw the young man in the car, something in his eyes had broken my heart. "You were so thin," I said, the memory becoming clearer. "You looked like you hadn't eaten in days." "I hadn't," James said. "When you knocked on my window, I thought you were going to tell me to move along. Instead, you asked if I was okay. And when I said I was fine, you didn't believe me." The ballroom was dead silent now. Even Victoria had stopped protesting, staring at her husband in shock as he revealed a past she clearly knew nothing about. "You went back upstairs to your apartment," James continued, "and you came back down with a bag full of food. Sandwiches, soup, fruit, even a thermos of hot coffee. You gave it all to me, along with $20 that I later learned was your lunch money for the entire next week." I felt tears mixing with the blood on my face. I remembered that night so clearly now. The young man had looked so grateful, so overwhelmed by the simple kindness, that I'd wanted to do more but didn't know how. "You told me," James said, his voice growing emotional, "that everyone deserves a chance to get back on their feet. You said that kindness was free, but it was also the most valuable thing anyone could give." The crowd was completely captivated now. This wasn't the evening they'd expected when they came to a charity auction, but they couldn't look away from the drama unfolding before them. "I never forgot that night," James continued. "Your kindness gave me hope when I had none left. I used the $20 you gave me to buy a newspaper and apply for jobs. I got hired as a dishwasher at a restaurant the next week. From there, I worked my way up, saved every penny, invested wisely, and built everything I have today." He paused, looking around at the opulent ballroom, the wealthy guests, the life of luxury that surrounded him. "Every business decision I've made, every deal I've closed, every success I've achieved, started with the hope you gave me that night. You didn't just save my life, Elena. You gave me the foundation for everything I've become." Victoria was backing away now, her face pale with the realization that her perfect world was crumbling. "James," she said, her voice desperate, "what are you saying? She's nobody." "She's just a server who—" "She's the reason I'm standing here today," James interrupted, his voice rising with anger. "She's the reason I had the strength to build the empire you've been so eager to spend. And you just pushed her down a flight of stairs because you thought she didn't deserve basic human decency." The crowd was murmuring loudly now, phones appearing to record what was clearly going to be a major scandal. James Ashworth, one of the most powerful men in the country, was publicly confronting his wife for assaulting the woman who had changed his life. "I didn't know," Victoria said weakly. "How was I supposed to know about some random encounter from 12 years ago?" "You weren't supposed to know about it," James said, his voice cutting. "You were supposed to treat all people with respect and kindness, regardless of their background or bank account. You were supposed to be a decent human being." He turned back to me as the ambulance sirens grew louder outside. "I've been looking for you for years," he said softly. "I hired private investigators, searched through records, tried everything I could think of. I wanted to thank you, to show you what your kindness had accomplished." "I never expected thanks," I said, my voice weak but sincere. "I just saw someone who needed help." "That's exactly why it meant so much," he replied. "You helped because it was the right thing to do, not because you expected anything in return." The paramedics arrived then, rushing into the ballroom with professional efficiency. As they began examining my injuries, James stood and addressed the crowd that had gathered around us. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. "You've witnessed something tonight that I hope will stay with you for the rest of your lives." The crowd was hanging on his every word. "You've seen how wealth and privilege can corrupt some people into believing they're better than others. You've seen how power can make people forget their humanity. But you've also seen the true power of kindness, compassion, and treating every person with dignity." He paused, looking directly at Victoria, who was standing frozen at the top of the staircase. "My marriage is over," he announced, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "I cannot and will not spend my life with someone who would treat another human being with such cruelty, especially the woman who gave me the gift of hope when I needed it most." Victoria's face crumpled. "James, please. Think about what you're giving up. Think about our life together, our social standing, everything we've built." "We haven't built anything together, Victoria," he said firmly. "I built a business empire, and you've been spending the profits while contributing nothing but shallow vanity and casual cruelty. What happened here tonight just showed me who you really are." He pulled his wedding ring from his finger and handed it to her. "Consider this your notice. My lawyers will be in touch about the divorce proceedings." The crowd erupted in shocked whispers and the rapid clicking of camera phones. This was the kind of scandal that would dominate social media and gossip columns for months. As the paramedics prepared to transport me to the hospital, James leaned down close to me. "I'm going to make sure you're taken care of," he said quietly. "Medical bills, time off work, whatever you need. But more than that, I want to find a way to properly thank you for what you did for me." "You don't owe me anything," I said, though I was touched by his kindness. "I owe you everything," he replied. "And I promise you, your life is about to change for the better." 6 months later, I was standing in the lobby of the Rodriguez Community Center, watching children from my old neighborhood participate in after-school programs that provided tutoring, meals, and hope for families struggling to make ends meet. The community center bore my name, but it had been funded entirely by James Ashworth through his foundation. It was his way of honoring the kindness I'd shown him 12 years earlier, but it had become so much more than that. "Any regrets?" James asked, joining me at the window where we could watch kids playing basketball in the gymnasium. "None," I said, as I always did when he asked that question. This is better than anything I could have imagined. The assault charges against Victoria had been dropped at my request, but the scandal had effectively ended her social standing in the city. She'd moved to Europe, where according to gossip magazines, she was trying to reinvent herself among people who didn't know about her past behavior. James had insisted on paying for my medical treatment and had offered me a job managing the community center. The work was challenging but rewarding, and it paid enough for me to move Carmen and myself into a beautiful apartment just blocks away from the center. More importantly, it gave me the opportunity to help other families facing the same struggles I'd known for so many years. We provided job training, childcare, educational support, and sometimes just a safe place for people to believe that their circumstances could change. Carmen loves her new school. I told James as we watched the children play. My daughter had been accepted into one of the city's best private schools on a scholarship that James had quietly arranged. She was thriving academically and socially, surrounded by opportunities I'd never dreamed of providing for her. "She's a remarkable kid," James said. "Just like her mother." We stood in comfortable silence, two people whose lives had been forever changed by a moment of unexpected kindness and a moment of inexcusable cruelty that had revealed the true nature of everyone involved. "You know what I learned that night at the auction?" I said, thinking back to the marble staircase and the shocked faces of 50 wealthy guests. "What's that?" "I learned that character isn't about what you have or where you come from. It's about how you treat people when you think nobody important is watching. It's about choosing kindness even when it costs you something." James nodded thoughtfully. "And I learned that sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen when we're young and desperate and think nobody cares about us. One act of kindness can change everything." Through the window, we watched Carmen leading a group of younger children in a game, her face bright with the confidence of a child who believed in her own possibilities. She'd grown up seeing her mother work multiple jobs and struggle to make ends meet, but she'd also seen the transformative power of compassion and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. "She wants to be a doctor," I told James. "She says she wants to help people the way we help people here at the center." "She'll make an excellent doctor," he said with certainty. "With your example showing her how to care for others, how could she be anything else?" A group of teenagers approached us, excited to show James the business plan they developed for a youth entrepreneurship program. He listened to their ideas with the same serious attention he'd once given to billion-dollar mergers, asking thoughtful questions and offering encouragement. Watching him interact with these kids, I was struck by how much he'd changed since that night at the auction. The wealth and power were still there, but he seemed more grounded, more connected to what really mattered in life. "They remind me of myself at that age," he said after the teenagers left to work on their presentation. "Full of dreams, but not sure how to make them reality." "The difference is they have support," I pointed out. "They have people who believe in them and resources to help them succeed." "That's the whole point," he said. "Nobody should have to face their dreams alone." As evening approached and the center began to quiet down, James and I walked through the halls, checking on various programs and activities. In one classroom, adults were learning English as a second language. In another, teenagers were getting help with college applications. The computer lab was full of kids working on homework with volunteer tutors. Every room represented hope, opportunity, and the belief that circumstances don't have to define destiny. It was everything I dreamed of when I was 17 years old, working at the grocery store and giving my lunch money to a stranger because it seemed like the right thing to do. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Victoria hadn't pushed me down those stairs?" I asked as we prepared to lock up for the evening. James considered the question seriously. "I think we would have found each other eventually," he said. "I'd been looking for you for so long, but maybe it would have taken longer, and maybe this center wouldn't exist yet. Maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to happen." "Even the ugly parts?" "Especially the ugly parts," he said firmly. "Victoria's cruelty revealed her true character, but it also revealed mine. It showed me what kind of person I wanted to be and what kind of life I wanted to live. Sometimes we need to see darkness to fully appreciate light." As we stepped outside into the warm evening air, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. From a snowy night on Santos Street, to a marble staircase at an exclusive charity auction, to this community center where dozens of families were building better futures, it had been a path marked by both kindness and cruelty, both hope and despair. But through it all, the lesson remained constant: how we treat each other matters. Every interaction is an opportunity to lift someone up or tear them down, to show compassion or indifference, to be part of someone's salvation or their suffering. "Thank you," I said to James as we parted ways in the parking lot. "For what?" "For remembering. For caring. For showing me that one moment of kindness can echo through years and touch lives we never even knew we were affecting." He smiled, the same gentle expression I remembered from that scared 19-year-old in the beat-up Honda Civic. "Thank you for teaching me that everyone deserves a chance, and that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or influence. It's simple human kindness." As I drove home to Carmen, I thought about the story I would tell her about my day, about the teenagers, business plans, and the adults learning new skills, and the children playing in a safe, supportive environment. But mostly I thought about the power we all have to change someone's life with a single act of compassion. Because the truth is, we never know when the person we help today might be the person who changes our world tomorrow. We never know when our kindness might be the thing that gives someone hope to keep going, to dream bigger, to become more than their circumstances suggested was possible. The woman who was pushed down the marble stairs that night was nobody special, just a single mother trying to make ends meet. But she had been someone special 12 years earlier to a homeless teenager, and that moment of recognition had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. If this story taught you something about the power of kindness and the importance of treating everyone with dignity, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Remember that character isn't about wealth or status. It's about how we choose to treat each other when we think nobody important is watching. Subscribe for more incredible stories about the moments that change everything. And never forget that you have the power to be someone's turning point, someone's reason to hope, someone's reminder that good people still exist in this world. Choose kindness. Choose compassion. Choose to see the humanity in everyone you meet. Because you never know when your simple act of decency might be exactly what someone needs to change their entire life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.